If you are about to embark on a process automation journey, before you set sail, it is important to lay the proper groundwork for your journey. In this session today, we will share some of the essential prerequisite questions to consider. What are some of the common challenges in implementing process improvement initiatives? What are some of the best practices for sustaining process improvement over time? As the leader of a business, how does one create a culture of continuous improvement in my organization? What are some common pitfalls to avoid when managing change in an organization? How do I address resistance from middle management and frontline management during a transformation? And finally, what does success look like, and what are some of the successful outcomes you can achieve? With me today is Roy Slack, board member and past president of Cementation Americas and recent president of the Canadian Institute of Mining, Metallurgy, and Petroleum. Roy is currently on the board of Torex Gold Resources. Roy, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for the invite, Scott. I mentioned it in LinkedIn. I'm not an expert in this area. I called myself a lay person, but I've seen a lot of it through my career. And when we talked before, we had an interesting discussion. So I'm looking forward to this one.
Well, I imagine in your experience, having run a large project management company and watching your clients implement technology to automate their processes, that you have seen both good and disastrous implementations.
Well, I wouldn't say disastrous. All clients are great. Some are better than others, but yes, yeah. Over the years, I've seen all kinds of implementations, but of course, the ones I'm most familiar with are the ones we've done within our own groups, and so I've got experience from the outside looking in, and also leadership experience from within.
It's important to understand some of the popular process improvement methodology and practical applications that companies implement to have successful automated outcomes for their processes. So I'm going to delve into some of the popular process improvement technologies. You have Six Sigma methodologies, which is to minimize variation within an end product. You have an impact that gets created of consistent processes leading to customer satisfaction. You have lean manufacturing, which is to cut out or down on waste, streamlining workflows and eliminating non-value added activities. A great impact of that is to reduce waste and improve that productivity. You have total quality management, or TQM, which is really to achieve operational excellence by emphasizing quality. And you have something that I use all the time as PDCA cycle of plan, do, check, and act. It's a reiterative process for continuous improvement. So you know how your ongoing optimization is adapting. You have Kaizen, which is a Toyota production system concept for incremental improvements where employees can engage, work on problem solving, and work on daily improvements to impact the organization. And then one of my favorites is, to start right, is to really look at an effective way for process mapping, where you visualize the process that you're using through flowcharts and diagrams to understand, where the opportunity for change needs to take place from your existing state to your future state. It gives clarity and alignment on your process understanding. So remember that the successful process implementations involve a combination of methodologies tailored to specific organizational needs. And by leveraging these different tools and approaches, leaders can drive effective process automation and achieve desired outcomes. So, Roy, in your experience, what are some of the common challenges in implementing process improvement initiatives?
Well, I've certainly experienced a number of the process systems that you've talked about. I think one thing we all have to remember is this isn't new. I jokingly said, Ford was involved in process improvement. That's Henry Ford, not Doug Ford. But this has been around for a while. And from a leadership standpoint, the big challenge isn't the processes. The big challenge is change management. Because anytime you're implementing a process, there's change involved, and it impacts people. one of my favorite quotes, it's a paraphrase from Tolstoy. It's everyone wants change, but nobody wants to change. And so in all of these, the route to success in all of these implementation plans is understanding change management.
And so when you're about to, as a senior leader, when you're about to embark on this change, I've seen that where successful ones work is where leadership is really engaged, and where it doesn't work so well is when there is a lack of leadership support. And I think we
Absolutely. Yeah,
talk,
absolutely.
need to be a cheerleader, right?
Yeah. And it goes beyond just support, because what I've seen is, uh, let's say the leader says, yeah, that's a good idea, go ahead. Well, that's not a very inspiring speech. I think the leader has to be excited about it, has to be inspired by the change, and because the leader has to sell it to everyone, throughout the company. And, uh, you know, I remember reading a book by, I think it was Jeffrey Moore, Crossing the Chasm. And it's about implementing technology, but it's about technology in terms of retail. So how do you sell an Apple phone? And there's the early adopters. Crossing the chasm is when it becomes a mainstream idea. And the same concept can apply to implementing new technologies within your business or your project. But what Moore doesn't address, because Moore's focus is on convincing the public that it's a good idea and selling it to the public. So in our businesses that would be the client. But what we found is the first thing we have to do with the new process is to sell it internally.
Mm.
Have your own people buy in, because it's an uphill battle. If I've gone to a client and convinced them that a different contractual format is the way to go, and then we do that, we win that project, and our project people are saying, why are we doing this? Let's just do a fixed price job. So you really need to have that buy-in internally. So not just with your client or with your partners, but with your own people as well. Oh, I've lost you there, Scott.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I know that a lot of this has to do with employees that may resist change to establish, that really clear vision from the executive on how to make sure that employees don't resist that change.
Well, the fundamentals of change management and what I've learned over the years and I've tried to apply is those two really pertinent, really foundational questions. And the first one is why. And a lot of our work in change management has been actually in safety in this industry. And the why is pretty self-explanatory. It's easy to sell the why. You want to go home every day to your family. You don't want to get hurt. You don't want your coworkers to get hurt. But the why is very important, and the why will be different for different people. The other questions are the me questions. Okay, so you've said why we're going to do it, but how is this change going to impact me?
Okay,
My
sure.
department, my people, me personally, and that me question is different all along the line. From the office, management, supervision, our people at the face, or on the shop floor, or in the mill, or wherever people are actually doing the physical work. That me question is different, and you have to address that for everyone to get that buy-in. I mean, you can dictate change and you can force change, but that's a long road to hoe. But what you really want to do is get those two questions nailed down. Why are we doing this? And how does it impact me? And that impact for me should be positive, right? So
I'm sure it's in the forefront of everybody's mind during a change process, to think about what is it in it for me. So, some good examples of that is meeting some of the targeted goals. How am I going to be rewarded? That whole concept of being able to understand that the work that was accomplished was appreciated by the organization.
for sure. And in the business of mine contracting, uh, if I'm at the face, if I'm operating in jumbo and someone tells me we're going to do this, and how's it going to impact my bonus? How's it going to make my job safer? How's it going to make my job easier? Because if it makes my job easier, I can probably get more footage and make more bonus. Like those individual questions, and there's a different impact on the supervisor than there is on the miner, for example, or the area manager, or the general manager, or the executives. So you need to, it's the ultimate exercise in empathy,
Mm.
because you have to put yourself in everyone's shoes and ask that me question.
So, in your experience there, what are some of the best practices for sustaining process improvement over time?
Yeah, well, this is when I talked about what were once vices are now habits, uh, you really want to get in the habit of doing things. And I refer again to safety, where originally hazard analysis was a pain.
Mm.
Supervisors would say, "Why are we doing this? It's time consuming. I could be down there drilling. Instead, I'm up here going through the risks, which are obvious." And over the years, that has become a habit. And if you were to send someone to the workplace on a new task without doing a hazard analysis, somebody's going to raise their hand and say, "Hey, we need to talk about this." So it's transformed over time from something that was a change to something that is now a habit. If you look at seatbelts, when seatbelts were first legislated, people complained about them being uncomfortable. It takes time. I forgot to do it. Now it's a habit, and uh, maybe a good analogy, maybe not, but that is one way to sustain new processes. After saying that, that's not easy. A lot of times it takes a great deal of time to do that.
Well, I'm sure as you're trying to embrace that culture of continuous improvement, one area is to really empower your people, like you're talking about at the face, for through training and development. What's been your experience in terms of doing that well?
The and I got thinking about this after, because part of it depends on where you are in the world. So that empathy goes beyond, uh, you know, I shouldn't say it goes beyond, but you have to begin to recognize uh, the different cultures and how they respond too. But I think if you talk about the reason why, and then you want to engage people on how you're going to do it. Now you can dictate that. You can say, we're going to implement this system and this is how it's going to work. But even the implementation, you want to get uh, engagement from your people. So, okay, we're going to implement this new process. Where do you think we should start first? What department or what project? And how do we want to roll it out? And what kind of communications? Get your key people involved. Get your leaders involved, but also your de facto leaders. The people that influence others, but don't necessarily have a title that you'd recognize as a leadership title. And that's very important too.
Well, as a business leader, when you're trying to initiate that continuous improvement through your organization, as you said, it's really important to be able to find those leaders at all levels of the organization that people look up to, and then we'll say, "Hey, listen, this is a really good idea. This is why we should do it." But I think an important thing that you mentioned just now is, as you're sharing that vision of why we're doing this, it's not to tell your entire organization the how. because that's where you really want the input and buy-in from your entire team to start thinking about, how does that improvement look better? How can I make that automation transformation with my ideas? Not necessarily what you're telling me. You might give me some good ideas, but I have some good ideas to bring to the table, and that's how you can unleash great value in an organization, I would think.
I remember a specific story when we were implementing lean on one of our projects, and I was attending the morning lean meeting, and the people with the data. I mean, there were two walls full of graphs and data, and they were going through it, and I was kind of at the back, and a couple of miners in front of me were talking about, you should have seen the bass I caught last night. Man, it put up a fight. I had it on the line for 10 minutes. It was a 10-pound test line, but that thing really tested the line. I'm whatever they were saying, but you get the idea. Paying no attention, weren't interested. And so what we did is there were a couple of guys that were naysayers. Maybe you'd call them old timers, not as old as I am now, but they were old timers on the crew. And we talked to them about this and said, yeah, too much information here. What information do you need? What would you like to know? And their first response, we don't need to know anything. We know how to do our job. And so by starting to work with them, I say, well, that overbreak, I mean, if we use the computerized drill program, what's it doing to the overbreak? I'm just ad-libbing some examples, but eventually we got a couple of people involved. We revitalized that program. We still had all the data, but the question was, what data do you need? In shaft sinking, for example, the shaft superintendent doesn't need to know the cost of concrete. Doesn't even, and what they really need to know is the volume of concrete per pour, because they have no influence over the cost. Somebody in purchasing has made that deal. That price per meter cubed is what it is, but they do have influence over overbreak, waste. I mean, if you have to dump half a truck because your forms are full, so it's really thinking about what aspects of the job can the people at the face influence, and then why do you give them more data than that? Again, I referenced the shaft. The price of piping means nothing because the guys in the crew, supervisors, can't influence that cost in the shaft, but they can influence the quantity of explosive used, and they can influence the quantity of concrete. So looking at, we've just got so much data, every system, and that's something we're struggling with as an industry and as a society right now. But going back to looking at what can our people at the face on the shop floor in the mill, what information can they use to become more efficient, cost efficient, to become safer, to do their job better?
So what are some of the common pitfalls to avoid when managing change and implementing new automation and technology?
There's, the first ones I mentioned, I think the why is very important. The we questions are very important. Engaging your people in how it's going to be done, that's important. Communication. And people talk about this all the time. John Maxwell wrote a great book, and I love the title, Everyone Communicates, Few Connect. And when you think about that, you can give it, and again, I reference safety. You can give a speech about safety. You can put posters up. You can communicate. But are they talking about it at the face? Has it influenced your culture where the work's being done? And there has to be a barometer for that. There has to be a way to measure that, because that communication isn't enough. You need that connection. And I think the best laid plans, a lot of them fall at that point. And there's a couple of reasons they do. One is credibility. Oh, you said the system would do this, this, and this, and hey, my bonus is still the same. We didn't get any more footage. My job hasn't got any easier. So credibility is critical to get buy-in on anything. But that communication piece is very important.
Oh, if you neglect that communications piece, you're really neglecting the people dimension of the change that you're trying to get an outcome for. And I've even seen when you've done that well, there's always that period when you're trying to implement new things where you go through this trough of despair, where tends to be a dip in you smiling because you've experienced this before, right? With your people, where there seems to be a little bit of dip in morale and productivity. And so that's where making sure that there is really strong communication and pulling in and involving some of those key leaders at each one of those levels, at the face all the way up to your middle management, to be able to get through that and persevere. Have you experienced that trough of despair yourself?
Yeah, it's what do you call it? The Marianas Trench. It's a deep, deep trough. And one word of advice, you don't want to set precedents. And what I mean by that is the first time a new process struggles, if you give up on it, then everyone sees these new implementations as just the flavor of the month.
Right.
Oh, remember the last one? We worked on it for 2 months, didn't work. This one's going to be the same. It's, if you have to give up on a program for some reason, you better communicate it very well, and you better explain why, and that it was something we tried. We've had some lessons learned, which will help us on the next. There's a message that you have to give when you decide not to go ahead with the process. But that getting through that. I remember it was Risto Laminin I worked with in Sudbury, and I mean Risto told me once, "You've got a real challenge. You put your best person on it."
Mm-hmm.
Simple as that. And if it's important to your organization, and if it's a real challenge, is your best person on it?
Well, there you go. I mean, that solution there helps you build the awareness that you need, create a sense of urgency, and if done right by putting your best person on there, you're going to demonstrate the benefits of the change. And that's so much different than focusing on trying to push a change out instead of generating a pull for the change.
Yeah, it's the other thing that's tricky, and I've seen this happen before, and I've actually been part of it in one instance. If you have a naysayer, putting them on a committee, hoping that their mind will change, you have to be careful of that. It sounds like a good plan, but it may backfire on you. So I've had that work, and I've had that not work. So that's, when you come back to all of these, it's change management, but then you talk about leadership and knowing your people, and implementing a change. You really have to know your people, who you're going to have leading it, who's going to champion it, how it's going to be implemented, and who's going to be involved. So all of these are, leadership qualities, right? Knowing your people, change management, communications, and so leadership is so critical to implementing and sustaining any process change.
And I totally agree with you. I think it's really important to remember that change management is not about processes; it's about people.
Yeah.
So now let me ask you this question, because we've kind of touched around it, but how do you address resistance from middle?
If you've got that resistance, I think the first thing to do is seek to understand before trying to be understood. And I can't remember who I'm rhyming off all these quotes. I wish I knew who said them, but far too often we go into the business of selling, and saying, well, you don't think this is going to work, but I'm telling you, it worked on this project or it worked with this company. It gained and trying to sell the idea. I think it's really important to listen and say, what are your concerns? You don't think it'll work? Fair enough. Uh, why don't you think it'll work? And it's not a debate. It's listening and understanding, and then trying to address those concerns. So it's not trying to override or sell someone on something. It's trying to engage them, understand what their concerns are, figure out how together you can address them. And I think that's one of the areas that we miss the boat on there, is we spend more time trying to sell the idea than we do on trying to understand what the challenges are. And there are always challenges with any change.
I think listening is such an important skill for a leader, right? So that they can be in a position to properly coach. So I think that what you're saying is you need to involve the middle and frontline managers in that decision-making process. And that helps them, buy in and gives them a voice. And then once you've listened, then you can look at a better way to provide support and training, which will help equip that manager with the necessary skills to navigate the transformation successfully.
Yeah, and the again, addressing. We go back to communication and addressing concerns. Communication isn't about talking, although I'm doing a lot of talking on this show. But the communication is really about listening and understanding. And once you get in that mode, it's amazing, because what happens is, often the people that are designing the processes are designing from their end, okay, from their understanding of the challenges of the business process they're engaging in. I reference mining because that's the industry I'm in. But if you haven't worked at the face, then without listening and understanding what those challenges are, you don't know them. So you're designing a process from one end, and if you're lucky, it will get the desired impacts on the other end. But once you start engaging the people that are doing the work, engaging the people that have to implement the work, people that are impacted, you begin to understand how the process has to roll out for everyone. And that helps you in communicating. It also helps you in designing it. You may be going back to the drawing board and saying, well, this link between accounting and operations isn't going to work based on the way we do our invoicing. So are we going to change our invoicing, or are we going to do something different?
As you start to get the bubbling up of the how this is going to be done by the input of your people, it's really important to remember that any change in initiative, that frontline management, those middle managers are essential change agents for you. So that's why it's so important to be a good listener, to be able to get the outcomes you're looking for. So with that in mind, in your experience, what does success look like, and what are some of the successful outcomes that you have seen achieved by applying these concepts and ideas?
Well, I think I've been so involved, like safety has been a passion of mine from when I first entered the industry. And over 40 years, I've seen our industry improve so much. I'm so proud of our industry for how we have taken on the challenge of safety. We've still got a ways to go, but the changes have been significant. And I come back to a safety culture, and your real safety culture is a culture at the face. So the successful implementation, or at Cementation, we talked about a best for project philosophy. And I remember visiting a site, and one of our miners was going, well, we were looking at doing this, And then we talked about what would be best for the project. And we decided to do this. When you start getting that decision making at the face is when you know you've been successful in your implementation. And that's just one example, but the key to it is, I guess, in terms of a process and innovation and applying lean, for example, when your people at the face or on the shop floor or in the mill are saying, boy, this is working well, or this is helping us, that's when you've got success. And even if management is seeing better numbers, if you don't hear that on the shop floor or in the mill, then you've still got work to do. So even if that process is working and providing some of the targets and meeting some of the goals you wanted, you've still got work to do if it isn't not only accepted, but embraced at the face. Embrace at the face. I just thought of that, Scott. That could be our new slogan. Embrace at the face.
And then to celebrate the success as well is always important, because then you're acknowledging, those crucial people, that got it done, that made that transformation and that change.
And I'll tell you something. This is another leadership lesson about recognition, because recognition is interesting, and you always have to think about those me questions again. So if I post on LinkedIn, Scott, great job, you did a great job, the other people that were involved in this are going to say, what about me? I did a great job too. This was a team effort. That darn Scott's taking all the credit. So yes, recognition's important. Recognizing the team, and maybe recognizing the team. If there's an individual that was outstanding, there's a kudos there, maybe some recognition as well. But you always have to, recognition and empathy go hand in hand.
Well, and to that point, I'd like to recognize and thank you and all the great work you've done through your career, especially as being past president of SIM, and all the team members that supported you for some of the great new things that you accomplished during your tenure as president there. I want to truly thank you today for some of your insights and comments on some of the ideas that need to be thought about when you're going to go through a transformation like this. And I hope that everybody that was on this LinkedIn Live got value out of our discussion with Roy. Mr. Roy Slack, thank you very much for your time today. I appreciate your thoughts and comments.